Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Hill. I'd like to introduce you to my Trello board for this class. Uh, I like to use Trello because it keeps all my information in a single spot, and I like to be able to access everything immediately and easily from that single spot. Trello is a Kanban board style way of presenting and manipulating information. If you think about a Kanban style way of presenting information, consists of boards, buckets, and cards. The class itself is a board. Think like a cork board. The entire board is the board. You divide that cork board into different sections. If you just kind of draw lines, vertical lines across the board, you can divide it in different sections. Those sections are called buckets. And then cards are kind of like placing sticky notes on that cork board. So if you think of having a board for your class where you have different set areas or sections for information, and then you write the information on the sticky notes and stick it on there, that's essentially what a Kanban board style mode of information is. The Trello is just an electronic version of it. I like it because I like it because I can move the cards around, but I like it because of how it keeps everything together and keeps everything organized. When I develop or lay out a board for a class, I usually keep the more general buckets on the left side of the board and then move to more specific items on the right side. Eventually, I'll end up with a bucket for each week of the course to contain all the information and materials I need for that week's material. When I think about structuring the buckets, I usually start, sometimes there's an introductory card, but usually I'll start with information that I think is more important or more relevant in that bucket, and then move down to things that are less useful, less important, or less likely to be needed by me or by, in this case, you guys as the students. So essentially, when you're thinking about my Trello boards, you're thinking about moving from left to right and down to the bottom to get the access the information. Let me show you what my Trello board looks like for this class. I'll just share my screen and then you can see. This is the Trello board for Philosophy 3022, Cartesianism and its Critics. So this is the board set to public, so you don't need to have a Trello account to access it. You can take a look at the information, you can read any of the cards, you can access anything on the cards without having to have a Trello account. That's part of the reason why I'm using Trello, is that you guys can access it easily and without having any sort of need for setting up an account. When you look at the cards as they're here, you can see that there's a lot of information on the cards. Some cards have text on the front of them. These are titles for the cards. You can see that if you look at the very first card right here. The bucket is information about Dr. Hill, him and her, he and him, which is me. And then the first card just shows a little bit of what this is about. This is about me, Dr. Hill, and my office. When you look at the outside of the card, you can see in the left side, the lower left, there's these bars. That indicates that there's a description inside the card. And then there's this checkbox. That indicates that there's a checkbox with 11 items. This is just a way of presenting information. If you look at the other cards, you can see how the card below it has an attachment added to it. And you can see further to the right, there are cards with other features on the outside of them that will give you information about what's on the inside of the card. Just to walk you through the buckets themselves before we move on to the detailed information about the cards, I start with some stuff about me. Then I move on to course admin information. This has an introductory card here. And then you can see it has a variety of different cards below it. Sometimes you have to scroll down to see all the cards. The more important ones, the video introduction to the course, statements about accessibility, The course syllabus are at the top, and then towards the bottom, the ones that hopefully are less likely for you to need. And some advice about what to do in the case of an internet service disruption, some external contacts that are good to have, so on and so forth. After course admin, there's a section on course norms and expectations. There's stuff about tutorials that might be helpful to you. Tutorials of the e-learning platforms and tools we'll be using in this course. The next bucket are issues related to, or contents related to student wellness, resources that might be of use to you if you need to access wellness resources. Then academic resources after that. Some are held in Weldon, some are external, but there are things that you might find helpful as you go through the course. After that are the assessments and the rubrics. There are descriptions of the different assessments we'll have in this class. And then beneath that are places to find the different rubrics for the assessments. And then we get into the buckets for each week. You can see how they're coded by week. The title of the bucket has the week and the dates. And then there's a number of different cards depending on what we've got going on that week. And you can see how I've also included an image of the book that we'll be reading for that week, entitled This Week's Reading, to help you identify and keep on track. And it just walks us through each week until the end of the term. So you can have all that information right at your fingertips. That's why I like to use this for the course. What I want to do is I want to show you a card. I want to show you one of the cards that has more content. So I'm in the course norms and expectations, and about halfway down there's a card called Course Communication Norms and Requirements. It's got a label on the front, a black label. That indicates the content of this card is dependent upon the class charter we'll talk about in the first week of class. Other cards have yellow labels. Those are just for me. Those indicate I still have more work to do to finish those cards. And then there are red labels for deadlines, which you'll see when we get into the week material again. But if you open the card, you just click on it and it opens, and you can see the title and the label, and there's a description on this card. There's an attachment, takes you to a Trello blog post about how to set strong work-life boundaries as a remote worker. Again, this is just information that you may appreciate or you may find useful or not. There are a couple of check boxes. You can use this as checklists, but I've used this as just ways of housing information about communication options that we'll have in the class, communication norms that I expect us to be following in the class. And there's also a comment at the bottom where I can add in comments to talk about some of the material in the card. So the cards themselves are information rich, and they're very, very flexible, which is why I like using Trello to hold this information. I'll let you explore the different cards. Again, these things will be updated. You can see how I still have to add in the rubrics for this class. Some of those are still in development, and some of those I just haven't added yet. But you can see as we get into the weekly how there's a deadline. There's a deadline every week for the discussion item that's due. You can open up the card there, and you can see the red label for deadline, and it describes what is at stake in the deadline, the discussion items, and what they're worth. One of the things about Trello that I hope you'll find helpful is you can do something called calendar view. It's on the right side of the board. It's right here called calendar. If you click that, it converts all the dates on the card to calendars, deadlines. So if we move to September, we begin to see anything that has a deadline attached to it or a timeline attached to it is now appearing on the calendar. Most stuff is due on Friday, of course, given the way in which we're setting up this class. But you can see how some, when we get to December, start to be due before Friday. So I hope that this calendar view is helpful to you. You can switch back and forth between the calendar view and the Kanban board view. And one other feature that you can do if you want to follow this board, so you get a notification every time there's a change, you go to the menu, which is on the right, and then you go to the More section, the 3 little dots that say More, and there's something that says Watch. You can say Watch this board, and you can see how now it says up in the upper left of the upper right of the board. It says I'm watching it. It means anytime that there's an update or a change to the board, and this would be the changes that I would make because I'm the only one that has access to changing the board, you'll get a notification. To follow the board, you do need to have a Trello account, but if you have a Trello account, it is another way to gain access to this information and be notified immediately when the information does change or when there's an update, when I complete it or when I add more content to it. You don't have to use Trello if you don't want to. The same information will be available through Microsoft Teams, which you'll be using, as well as through Western's OWL site. Although one of the reasons why I like Trello and I dislike OWL is precisely because it's so much easier to have the information. The interface is so much easier and faster, and I can get the information and download it much more quickly than using OWL. So Trello tends to be my go-to system. I hope that this little walkthrough is helpful to you. Again, just play around with it. You can't change anything on the board, but you can open things and access them. If there's any information or content you'd like to see on here that doesn't appear on here, please let me know. I'm happy to add more to the board. But the idea is that this will be a complete set of all the information you'd need for the course for this term. Thanks very much. Good luck, everybody. Please let me know if you need anything. Bye.